Well, The Wolf King Season 2 came out, the final season of the show, and I'll be honest, after the final season of The Dragon Prince, I didn't think I'd ever be able to find an animated show that had such a disappointing ending as that. Well, good golly gracious, we have a new contender. A challenger approaches, a claimant to the throne of crushed dreams and disappointed hopes. It is The Wolf King. Congratulations, Wolf King Season 2. You've managed to surpass a show that is currently seeking crowdfunding for a sequel series to convince a distributor to pick them up and give them another chance. Nice. It didn't have to be this way though, and that's the biggest shame of all, to be honest. After all, it started off so strongly. When I first saw the trailers for the first season of the show, I wasn't really sure what to think. It was clearly trying to invoke Game of Thrones vibes with its storytelling and overall vibe, but at the same time I wasn't sure. Not every made-for-Netflix animated show is created equal after all. Then I sat down to watch it and what do you know? It was really good! Like absurdly good for what seemed to be some low-budget animated adaptation of a very obscure series of fantasy novels. It was well acted in terms of its voices. The world building was rich and interesting. There was a lot of lore and backstory packed into the episodes that made you want to learn more and more about everything that was going on. The animation was really good for what it was. The action was exciting and it was really dark and brutal too. Yeah, they couldn't make it overtly bloody and gory, but I think that's where the show felt so impressive. It was able to make things feel gritty and grim without all of that. Characters were still dying some pretty horrible deaths and there were a lot of foul moments when you stop to think about it in any real depth. Like the fate of the Queen. Absolute yikes moment right there. Hell, Drew's dad and brother trying to straight up have him lynched in the town, that was probably a big one as well. It really set the tone well for what the world was going to be like, and it also finished off the season in a really interesting position. We have the lion regime overthrown in favour of the peasant Wolf King, who's revealed to be the last son of old King Wurgar. We learn that Prince Lucas is actually his biological half-brother, as King Leopold put Drew's mum under a spell so he could marry her after he'd murdered her husband and all her other kids. I told you, there were some horrific elements if you stop and think about it. A bunch of werelords had come around to join the wolf, the stags, the bears, the shark, the boar. Apparently there's a bunch of others across the realm too, but those are the main ones that have become loyal. At the same time though, the rat lords are firmly in the pocket of the lions. And in the end, Drew's adopted brother, who still blames him for the death of their mother, even though she was straight up murdered by one of the rat lords, but whatever, he's delusional. Against the odds, this guy somehow sails his ass across the sea to another realm, where the rest of the cat lords rule, and he summons an army to help retake the kingdoms and finish off the Wolf King and his band of rebels. Hell yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Oh, and on top of that we had a very obvious love triangle brewing with Drew, Whitley, and then Gretchen. It had so much promise and so much intrigue going. I was massively excited to see where it was going to go, and I was hopeful we'd get a decently long run of a couple of seasons, much like The Dragon Prince. I was hopeful for 3 at the very least, although at the same time, I knew that Netflix was a studio that was very trigger happy when it came to their properties. If they don't see the value, or it doesn't get the numbers they think it needs to justify the money they spent, you better believe they're going to cancel it without a second thought. I knew that as part of their deal, they had 2 seasons greenlit and finished. Well, I learned that pretty much immediately after watching the first season way back in March, and that the second season would come out later in the year. Immediately, part of me wondered how things were going to work out, but I figured they probably had some sort of soft ending for the show planned out, with the potential seeds and story threads to continue onwards, should the need arise if they get renewed. So I did get briefly hyped, but I went back into hibernation because in the end, it's a pretty obscure sort of franchise, and it didn't really have much to talk about in way of rumours and all that. However, that being said, a month or so ago, we got the news that Season 2 would be 100% the end of the series. It would be the show's final season, and there would be no renewal. And that's all well and good because, like I said, I figured they have an idea that this could happen, and they have some sort of soft ending planned. Well, then I saw the trailer and I thought, this does not look good. After all, I saw it, and in my heart, I think I started to realize that I've walked this long road before. I am once again staring down the barrel of the gun, knowing that this show has no chance of wrapping up everything they were setting up in this trailer. It was looking to be yet another Dragon Prince, and it was. But it was a million times worse. The Dragon Prince at least had some sort of soft ending to its main plot. This very much felt like it was a middle season of a much larger overarching story. It was just so frustrating that it was written this way, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Because there is a question to be asked and answered. If I didn't know that this was the final season, and thus I wasn't salty that the show was being cancelled and going nowhere, would I have thought that Season 2 was good? And I'll be honest, I still would have thought it would be mid at best. It really wasn't all that good compared to Season 1. Felt like night and day as if somebody completely different wrote it. The season was divided into 2 main overarching story threads. There's the tale of Drew and Whitley and their quest to save Gretchen from Prince Lucas. Then there's the siege of Highcliffe by the Cat Lord army. Now within these 2 stories there are various different subplots, some better and more interesting than others. Stepping away from my bias though, even then, I think that a lot of these story points were just not good. We'll start off with the main story with Drew, and a lot of this was legitimately interesting, except for one major element. They had a forced love triangle that made no sense. Drew's trying to propose to Gretchen at the start of the season, but he crashes and burns so hard that she runs off crying and gets kidnapped. He and Whitley then go out to save her, but Whitley's obviously jealous because she has feelings for Drew as well. They have some troubles because of this, and it quickly becomes apparent to everybody that Drew is into Whitley, and he straight up confesses to her, and she seemingly doesn't get the picture. She's super cold and cut off. It takes Gretchen later telling her how it is to make her figure it out, but of course by then we're hitting the end of the season and it no longer matters. It felt like forced and drawn out drama for the sake of keeping a love triangle going, even when it reached its obvious conclusion when he saves Whitley from the slavers and tells her that she is the most important thing to him. That is when they should have been written to kiss or confess or whatever. Instead, they just don't. I don't know if they were trying to keep true to the books, but if so, time to diverge, bro. It felt like the characters involved had to be hit with the idiot stick to keep this one going for much longer than it needed to. But wait, there's more to this. As part of Drew's journey, he meets the Goat Lord Baron Ewan, who's been usurped by his cousin, the slave trading Count Kessler, who goes on to burn his town and castle whilst trying to take Whitley to be sold. Drew helps evacuate the town and saves Whitley, but of course the homes and all the possessions are gone. The whole time they know him, Ewan seems like somebody who will always put his people first. He put them all in a trance to stop them fighting back against Kessler because he knew they wouldn't win and they could be hurt. That being said, he was going to let their kids be taken as slaves at the same time, so he's also a big-time coward. It's then later revealed that he betrays Drew to Lucas in exchange for a big ransom to help his people. It's a sad twist, but it's a good one that fits with the world and his character that we've seen. But then he instantly flip-flops and tries to help free Drew alongside the rest of the rebels. Why? Another traitor, the Horse Lord, Lord Conrad of Cape Gala, also joins them. Despite siding with Lucas from the get-go, he suddenly has a change of heart once this huge army of cat lords arrives. Why does this shift his perspective? What's changed? It's kind of too late at this point. It felt messy and silly. Like the writers couldn't figure out what they wanted the characters to be like. I think it felt a bit sloppy there at the end in the Cape Gala storyline, and it had me scratching my head. It felt like they wanted to do a classic Game of Thrones type twist, but they didn't have the guts to follow through on them completely. Before we move off of this storyline, there's also this whole thing with Drew's brother Trent. He betrays and tries to kill him again. Did this dude's dad seriously not clue him in that Drew was innocent the whole time before he went and got himself killed as well? Anyway, this guy dooms the kingdoms and Drew keeps giving him chance after chance, and I get it, he loves his brother. It's more to me that this guy also has a fairly rapid change of heart right there at the end. Like, what's going on with that? Felt rushed. This then takes us to the second storyline, the Siege of Highcliffe. This story, when you ignore that the season doesn't conclude anything, still has a few things that stink. Duke Bergen, who felt very rational and pragmatic, is reduced to becoming an absolute buffoon who throws a tantrum when he's not named as the king's closest advisor in favour of Drew's best friend and close companion. He fails utterly at protecting the people and realising the threat of the Cat Lords is ever present. He demands a parley with King Leopold, and yet instead of meeting on neutral ground, they go right into the heart of his power, which gets one of the Stag Lords straight up killed. Then he ignores that there is 100% going to be invasion soon in favour of trying to storm the palace. Was he sending out envoys to other lords to summon their armies to Highcliffe? No, not at all. I know the Shark Lord lost his lands, but what about the Boars and the Stags? Where were their soldiers? I feel like it was just bear and wolf guards. This guy is meant to be one of the great minds of the kingdom. They make that clear in the first season. Yikes! With a brains trust like this, it's no wonder King Wergar got overthrown. Seriously, it just felt completely out of character from his actions during the course of season 1. He then seemingly kills himself for no real purpose at the end. Like, why? Why did he do that? To buy his men time, yes, but where could they be going? Is that an exit? If so, why was this exit not heavily guarded earlier? Then Lucas could never have gotten in and taken Gretchen. Then there's also the Hector plot, which felt like it added nothing to the story at all. The dude dabbles in necromancy and gets way in over his head. At the same time, his brother, who I'm pretty sure sided with Lucas, is somehow allowed to walk around free and keeps threatening him until they have a scuffle and Vincent falls to his accidental and tragic death. He then haunts Hector for the rest of the season, and that's really it. It's a long-winded and boring storyline that wastes one of the more interesting characters from season 1 and accomplishes absolutely nothing. Even if this story continued into a third season, I don't think you could ever argue that this storyline was anything other than trash. It was boring, repetitive, and impacted nothing. Ugh. It's sad though, because apart from these flaws, I thought the show was still quite good. The action was great, the darker themes were of course ever present, the voice acting very good as well. Plus the rest of the story beats, if you pretend like there is a season 3 on the way, they work. But that's just the thing, isn't it? There isn't a season 3 on the way, the story's over, the series is done and nothing was wrapped up. Nothing was finished with, and it's just a big ball of unsatisfying. I mean, here we go, right? At the start of the season, they had this love triangle storyline set up, but by the end of the season, whilst Gretchen bows out from the race, so to speak, they still haven't resolved anything. Not even close. They introduced the slaver Count Kessler, and at the end, they have him take Drew captive to sell him as a slave, with Drew then transforming into a wolf to fight back. but we'll never know what happens next. Whitley's dad is dead. We'll never see the aftermath of that. Drew and his biological mother never got really any sort of closure to their storyline or much interaction at all. Same with her and her other son, Lucas. Speaking of Lucas, he vanished from the show for much of the endgame, only to come back briefly to kill Whitley's brother, before dipping again and murdering his dad and claiming the throne. A cliffhanger we won't follow up on. Only one of the Rat Lords is actually dead, and I'm pretty sure it is not the one that murdered Drew and Trent's mum. The Cat Lords have landed an army to re-establish control of the kingdoms, and they sacked Highcliffe. They have that new guy leading them who tells Lucas to kill Leopold. We won't see what happens next with him either. Hector's storyline, it just goes nowhere. A huge ball of unsatisfying storylines and cliffhangers. Ugh, that's all I can say about it. Ugh. I think it would be tempting to point the finger at Netflix and say, oh hey look, they cancelled this good show, for shame. They're so anti-consumer, rah rah rah. However, at a certain point, surely you have to level some blame at the writers, the producers, and the production company. From the get-go, I'm pretty sure they knew they had 2 seasons, 8 episodes each, right? That was confirmed. You know that you're producing this show for a notoriously trigger-happy company, which means that you are by no means assured to get a 3rd season. So why not write it to have an actual ending? I know it might not be book accurate, but these books do not even have a Wikipedia page. You cannot get much more obscure than this. Instead, just say it is inspired by the show. Have them overthrow Leopold at the end and have him flee back to Bast, where Lucas murders him with encouragement from the others. Have it made clear at the end of the season that the cats are beaten for now, but they'll likely someday return and the kingdom has to be ready. That way you actually have an ending, but if the show gets picked up for more, you know where it could go. Basically, scrap season 2 and rewrite it, that's what I'm saying. But sadly, it's too late, and so The Wolf King will go down in history as a show with so much potential that pissed it away on a very bad ending. It's a shame, but it is what it is. That being said, though, in the end, these are simply my opinions, and I'd like to hear yours. What do you think of The Wolf King Season 2 if you've seen it? Am I being too harsh? Maybe you think I'm not being harsh enough. I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.